Thanks for tuning in once again to NFL Draft Talk on the Our Football Network. Inside Our NFL Depth Charts, New England Patriot Talk with Evan Lazar of CLNS Media. Evan, good talking to you again.
Good talking to you as well. Exciting draft that we get to talk about today.
Yes, the New England Patriots going quarterback and not having to trade up to get him.
Who would have thought?
How about that? So how's everything going in Patriot? The fans must be ecstatic.
You would think so. I think that there's some mixed emotions. Now, maybe I'm just reading too much into what I hear on the radio and stuff like that, and not enough listening to the masses. But I think that there is sort of this concern with Mack Jones' ceiling, right? Is this player going to really be as good as some of the other quarterbacks that went in this draft, or guys that are maybe a little bit more toolsy, more physically talented, can run around a little bit better, bigger arms, things like that. But what I find ironic about the whole thing, Greg, is this is a fan base that for 20 years watched a quarterback that went in the 6th round that didn't have the huge arm, that didn't have the mobility, that didn't have those physical traits that everybody gets attracted to. And we watched him win 6 Super Bowls here. And now the same fan base is saying, well, we're not sure if Mack Jones has it, right? We're not sure if Mack Jones is physically talented enough to be a quarterback one or to be a star quarterback in the league. So there's some irony there, because I've listened for months about Brady and Brady leaving and going to Tampa. Then I listened about how Jimmy Garoppolo should come back and how they should trade for Jimmy with the 49ers. And they draft a pocket passer who's highly efficient, highly effective at what he does, at his craft and in his playing style that resembles a lot of both of those guys. And now it's a concern. Now it's not good enough.
And is that just talk, or is that from the younger crowd?
I would say it's probably just talk, and I'm probably, again, I might be looking too much into the loud noises on 98.5 and stuff like that here locally, but I think the biggest thing that you see is that you hear a lot of critiques of Mack Jones. He was playing with first round talents all over the field with him. He had Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. They go ahead of him in the draft. His receivers were drafted higher than he was. You hear about criticisms in terms of his athletic ability, the fact that he doesn't have that great mobility like a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance. And I think it misses the boat on what makes Mack Jones a really good prospect. And that is his ability to, first of all, throw with accuracy to all 3 levels is a huge one. Then the decision making, the processing speed, the understanding of pre and post snap reads and things like that, and just the ability to get the football out quickly, on time, accurately, and make the life a lot easier for his receivers. You go watch his tape at Alabama. How often is the receiver having to contort his body and make some ridiculous circus catch? Or how often is a guy open and Mack Jones just misses it, right? Or how often is it late? How often is he costing his team yards because he's not doing his job? And sure, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and Najee Harris and all these guys are great players, but time and time again, I saw Mack Jones do nothing but keep that offense humming, keeping it on schedule, putting the ball in the right place. And we've sort of lost luster for that style of play because of Patrick Mahomes, because of Russell Wilson, because of Aaron Rodgers, and because of the guys in the draft this year that are great runners and great scramblers. We have sort of soured on the pocket quarterback. And that's what Mack Jones is. He's your traditional pocket quarterback. And like I said at the beginning of this rant, that's what's worked here in New England for a very long time.
It's the perfect
so why
fit.
Are we fighting it?
That's the thing. I can understand if Mack Jones went to another team with a different system. And we talk about this every year at the draft. It's not just about the player. It's about, where does the player go? Does it fit the system? Does it fit the coaching staff, the talent around him?
Right.
I just had to talk, and I had this debate regarding Sam Darnold yesterday with Ryan Dunleavy about hearing, oh, well, if Sam Darnold had all this talent around him, he would be so much better. All right, well, whatever. That's a debate for another day that I don't necessarily agree with. But that's the point, is that you just don't know. And then, to talk about Mack Jones, it's almost like it's a knock against him that he played with a fantastic college football team with superior athletes and protection. Okay, you could say that, but now he's going to a team that has one of the best offensive lines in football, that wants to run the football first. It's just a perfect setup. And like you said, which quarterback in the last few years mimics Tom Brady more than Mac Jones?
Right. And it sort of felt like last year at times. And look, Cam had a short end of the stick, right? He comes in a COVID year. The playmakers around him were clearly
Yeah.
terrible. There was a lot going against him,
Yes.
right? But at the same time, last year, there were constantly times where I felt like they were trying to shove a round hole into a square peg. Right, they were trying to make Cam Newton this rhythm-based thrower that hit his back foot and got the football out, and did all these things that Tom Brady did here. And that's just not the style of passer that Cam Newton is, right? He's a rhythm thrower in the sense that he wants to hold the ball for a little bit longer to make throws down the field and use his arm strength and use his mobility at times. And he's not necessarily the type of guy that's 2.5 seconds and out every single time, right? And that's what's been so successful here. So I felt like making Cam read all these full field progressions with option routes and all this kind of stuff, it slowed his process down, and it made him worse in the long run. And it just didn't feel like it was a great stylistic fit for the type of offense that Josh McDaniels wanted to run. Now, if they hung on to Cam as they have, and they drafted Justin Fields or Trey Lance, and they wanted to change the
Yes.
system and go to more of a mobile passer and go to more of that kind of hold the football and wait for things to develop down the field and go to that type of quarterback, then that's all well and good. They could have thrown out the playbook, rewritten the thing, and started from scratch. But instead, what they've gotten is a guy that they can really go back to their roots and kind of hit the ground running with in terms of a stylistic quarterback play. And I did a breakdown on our YouTube channel, and I went through a bunch of plays from Mac Jones from the college football playoff where it's just hit the back foot, make the read, ball is out. Boom, 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 boom. Just like that. And you're like sitting there and you're like, okay, yeah, Devontae Smith gets open on this route. Sure. Jalen Waddle gets open on that route. Fine. But the ball's right there. Right? The ball is right
Absolutely.
there. It's in a perfect spot for the receiver, or he's throwing the receiver open, or he's hitting the deep ball in rhythm so that, yeah, he doesn't have a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes arm, but if you anticipate the deep ball and you throw it with the right
Yes.
timing, it's actually more important than just being able to sling it 80 yards
Yep.
down the field. So he has got a great kind of knack and instinct for the position. And there were instances, especially against Notre Dame and Ohio State, where he was under some pressure. He wasn't perfectly protected on every single throw, like a lot of people like to claim. There were instances where he was under some pressure and he handled it extremely well, whether it was throwing to beat the pressure or just moving off his spot just a little bit to buy himself some time and then making the throw. So, no, he's not going to run around like he's Russell Wilson. He's not going to throw bombs like he's Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, but he has a great feel for what Alabama was doing systemically in order to get the football out and get it to where it needs to be. And that really bodes well. The smarts, the accuracy, the timing, that all is things that I think is going to work extremely well with Josh
Yeah, you
McDaniels.
mentioned the Patrick Mahomes deal because that's what I see that I believe goes into maybe what could excite the Jets about Zach Wilson. And
Right.
we've talked about this, and I know I've talked about this on other shows with this particular draft of quarterbacks. I now that Mac Jones is with the Patriots, I think Mac Jones has just as good as a chance to become the best quarterback in this draft class as Zach Wilson, and maybe even Trevor
Right. Because a lot
Lawrence.
of it's about situation. Right. It's all about coaching, and it's all about situations. The system around them fails, right? They don't have the offensive line, they don't have the playmakers, they're being coached poorly, and that's why a lot of these guys bust and flame out of the league. So the other thing that I hear a lot about is, oh well, the Patriots don't have Devontae Smith, they don't have Jalen Waddle, they don't have the play. Alabama's receivers are better than the Patriots receivers.
Yeah.
And first of all, that's just crazy because we
Uh,
still haven't seen these guys succeed at
in
the
the
NFL
pros.
level
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't know if those guys are truly better. On paper, does Devontae Smith look better than Nelson Aguilar? Of course. But we don't actually know if he's going to be a great pro or not yet. We know Nelson Aguilar can play in the league, right? The other thing is people just ignore that they signed Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith.
That's
So
right.
they have two tight ends that he can throw to as well. So they have plenty of weapons around Mac Jones, especially with the power running game and the system that they're going to run. I think they have plenty of firepower for him. I'm really just curious to see when they pull Cam and when Mac Jones becomes the starter. That's
Yeah.
sort of going to be the real conversation here. It's not Mac Jones is a great fit. I think he can play. I think he's going to be great in their system. At what point does he get in there? Because it's going to be tough for Bill Belichick, I think, to start a rookie early on. I think it might be a while before we see Mac Jones.
Okay. Then you don't think, and I'm assuming that that's the case, that the Patriots are bothered much by the style difference again, because you just talked about it. Well, with Cam, aren't they going to try and still look more like that different offense that they were going
Yeah,
to install? So that means that 1 week they could be going 3, 4, 5 weeks running one offense. And
right.
then if Mac Jones comes in, either by poor play or an injury, they've got to scrap all of that. And it's just not the one. It's not just about the quarterback. The entire offense has got to learn
Right.
a completely different style.
So that's a concern that I have as well because okay, maybe that's more of a concern about 2021 and their record this year and their success this year, but just from a stylistic perspective, like I said, they made adaptations to the offense for Cam Newton last year. Certainly, they put in an entire option package, zone read, or read option type of plays, quarterback runs that obviously did not exist pre-Cam here in New England, but a lot of their passing concepts and a lot of their passing game was relatively the same until later on in the season where they really tried to kind of strip the system of all the optionality and stuff like that and make it a little bit of an easier process for Cam because he was just in such an unfair position with the lack of practice and stuff
Sure.
like that to run an offense that complex. They tried to simplify it a bit to make it a little bit easier on him. So their passing system, I would say, was more or less, they were still running similar concepts to what they were doing with Tom Brady. It wasn't a complete overhaul. So I think that they're still probably going to stick to the same passing system. The blocking, the run blocking, and the running game in general is going to be interesting. And that's why, and we don't really see this that often in the NFL, but the Taysom Hill model is kind of there a little bit for the Patriots with
Okay.
Cam, where eventually maybe they hand the keys over to Mac Jones to be the full-time starter. But let's say it's 4th and 1 on the goal line,
Sure.
right? And they need to get a yard.
Yeah.
Maybe you bring Cam Newton in and you run a read option type of play, or you run quarterback power, or some of the things. He had 12 rushing touchdowns last year, Cam.
Yeah.
Right? He was among the league leaders in rushing touchdowns a year ago. That's actually a Patriots record for a quarterback in a single season for rushing touchdowns. So he was a very effective. He was the best short yardage option that they had last year, and he's probably going to be the best short yardage option they have again this year. So I could definitely see a case to be made that if Matt Jones ends up being the best passer on the team and the guy that can help them the best in the passing game, that, okay, he plays 95% of the snaps, but on 4th and 1, on 3rd and 1, on situational football, when they need a yard, I would not be surprised at all if they have a package that they put Cam Newton in the game for, because he still can be valuable to the team, even if
Absolutely.
he's not the starting quarterback because of his running ability.
Just want to remind everybody to order the 2021 Our-Lads NFL Draft Guide at ourlads.com. This is actually the perfect time to order the guide because now you know which players are on your team. So all the Patriot players, I believe there's only one player that is not profiled, and that is Trey Nixon, the final draft pick.
Yeah.
And since the Patriots haven't signed any undrafted players yet, we don't know whether or not they will be in this draft guide yet. But it's also, of course, giving yourself an opportunity to take a look at all the other players and where they are across the league as well at ourlads.com. couple more things on the quarterback, and then we'll go through the rest of the draft, Evan, and that is Jarrett Stidham. So let me ask you, if Cam gets injured, or let's
Right.
say he wasn't even on this team and Stidham was the backup. So let's just put that, okay, and they're in camp and they're in preseason and Stidham somehow, it's just Stidham and Jones. Is it automatically Jones or Stidham? Will he get a chance with or without Cam Newton there to beat out Mac Jones, either for
He's
second
gonna
or first string?
he's gonna get a chance because Bill Belichick believes in chances, right? Bill Belichick's not going to hand anything to Mac Jones. He's not going to anoint Mac Jones as the starting quarterback until he said after the draft, Cam's our quarterback until somebody plays better than he does, right? So that was sort of a message to both Stidham and Mac Jones, like, I'm not handing this job to anybody. It's Cam's job right now because he's the incumbent starter, but I'm not handing the job to either one of you. Both of you are going to have to go out there in training camp and in the preseason and earn it and take the bull by the horns. And I think that was something last year in training camp. The Patriots were a little bit disappointed in Jared Stidham that he didn't have more of a competitive side to him to beat out Cam Newton, because it wasn't exactly like Cam was clearly the best quarterback in camp. He was clearly the best runner in camp, obviously, but it wasn't like Cam Newton was setting the world on fire in training camp, right? It definitely had some bumps in the
It's true.
road. So they really wanted Jared Stidham to win that job last year. I believe that. I think they wanted Jared Stidham to win the job, but he didn't rise to the occasion. So I think that message from Bill Belichick there was, Mac, I'm not going to just hand you this starting job because I took you in the first round. You're going to have to go out there and beat out Cam Newton, former
As well
NFL
it should
MVP.
be. Yes.
Yeah, and you're not going to just get it handed to you. Now, the interesting thing about Stidham is that he seems to be doing all the right things this offseason that maybe he wasn't doing last offseason, leading workouts, working behind the scenes with his teammates and passing camps and stuff like that they've held in California. So there is some optimism internally that he's having. He's being a little bit more proactive
Okay.
this year than he was last year, but I'm not going to do the whole Jared Stidham thing again. We tried to hype him up last offseason when Brady went to
I
Tampa
know.
Bay, and until he proves to me and shows us tangibly that he's worth talking about,
Sure.
I think we can consider this a two-headed race with Cam and Mac Jones for now.
Well, look, I never envisioned, and I don't think many fourth round quarterbacks are going to realistically be able to start in the NFL for at least a couple of years anyway.
Right.
I just and not everybody's Russell Wilson. It just doesn't happen like that. So
there was just a lot of inconsistencies to his game, and that's why he was a mid-round draft
that's
pick.
right.
And that's
Yeah.
why he's a backup, is because there are instances, and even last year in the preseason, his rookie preseason, so 2 years ago, where you can see it, right? He makes a great throw. He puts the ball in a great spot. He makes a great read. And there are instances where that happens, but it comes and goes. Right. There's one play in camp where he makes a great throw. Everybody's hooting and hollering, great throw, Stiddy, all this kind of stuff. And the next throw, it's almost intercepted. Right. Or the next throw, he holds the ball for 4 seconds in the pocket and gets, sacked in a training camp environment. Right.
Uh-huh.
And that's what happens with him, is that there are instances. And I think that's why some Patriots fans have latched on to Jared Stidham, is because there are times in that Detroit game, in the first preseason game of his rookie season, the Tennessee game, his second preseason game, he had some flashes. He had some really good downfield throws, and people remember those plays. Those plays stick out to you, but when you actually get down from a play to play, kind of studying it throw to throw, you see a guy that's got a whole lot of peaks and valleys.
It will benefit him more to go back to the old style.
With Jared Stidham,
Yeah.
I would say a little bit. He's definitely somebody that holds the ball way longer than someone like a Tom Brady or even a Mac Jones.
Yeah.
And he's not immobile, right? He can scramble. I wouldn't. He's not.
Yeah,
You're not going to run any sort of design run with Jared Stidham involved. But we did notice in preseason that he was able to pick up those, 3rd and 6. Everybody's covered down the field, but there's nobody with the eyes on the quarterback. He can pick up 7 yards, and I think Mack Jones might be able to do that too, based
sure.
off of some of the things that we've seen with him at Alabama. So I don't know. Matt Jones is just a lot better in pretty much every way than Jared Stidham. So
Yeah, I
I,
know.
I, I just find it hard to believe that this is going to be much of a competition.
If he doesn't impress the team enough, could he be cut?
Maybe, a few years ago they traded Jacoby Brissett for Philip Dorsett, and they had those three quarterbacks. They had Brady, they had Jimmy G, and they had Jacoby Brissett, and they had to sort of start making some decisions because they knew they weren't going to be able to hang on to all of them. Brady obviously was the one they decided, and rightfully so. Thank God they decided to hang on to Brady and not go the other direction. So they had to kind of make a decision, and they were able to flip. Jacoby Brissett had a huge fourth preseason game that August before they traded him for Philip Dorsett. He threw for a couple touchdowns. He ran for another one. He just lit the world on fire in a fourth preseason game. And they were able to get something of value in a
Okay,
receiver that wasn't, Randy Moss,
sure.
certainly, but at least brought something to the table with
Yeah.
speed and stuff like that. So could they theoretically shop Jared Stidham and see if they could get an equivalent of like a Jacoby Brissett for Philip Dorsett type of trade? I wouldn't rule something like that out.
Okay. All right. Now let's move on to pick number 2, and this is also where the Patriot fans had to be pretty stoked to get the best defensive tackle in the
Yeah.
draft in round 2. I mean, we all understand, I think, why he lasted to the second round a little bit, because he is a high risk, high reward type player.
Right.
And we seem to get these guys at Alabama, to tell you the truth, especially the guys along the front lines of the defensive line. I mean, there are guys around the league. Some of them pan out, and some of them are still kind of hanging around, and they're okay rotational players, but they never have become the type of stars that you think that they're capable of, because Barmore's got that type of talent. He's got the tools to be a dominant every down player.
He does. And he's a player that was highly inconsistent at times at Alabama, right? One game, college football playoff, he put up 12 quarterback pressures in those two games, couple tackles for loss,
Yeah.
and dominated both Notre Dame and Ohio State's offensive lines, who have multiple NFL prospects on those lines, and he's beaten them up. So he has that ability. And if he had put that all together last year and did that for the entire season, we're talking about a guy that probably goes in the top 20
Yeah.
of the draft
Easily.
last weekend.
Yes.
Right. But the problem is that some games he disappears, some games he goes off. So there's some of that inconsistency there with him as well. There's also some rumors. I don't know how much I can confirm it, but there definitely are some rumblings of motivation issues. Just showing up to practice on time, being motivated, being focused on football, those kind of little things. And that's, I think, certainly something that has caused him to slip just a little bit in the draft too. This is a player, and the Patriots are the perfect program for him to go
That's
into,
right.
like Alabama was, but this is a player that you have to stay on. Right. You have to make sure he's doing the little things. You have to make sure that he's in his playbook, and he's in the film room, and he's in the weight room, and he's going to have to be, managed a little bit by the coaching staff. And the Patriots are very familiar with those types of
Yeah.
players. So it's not like he's anything different than any other guy that they've managed in the past. So I think they're capable of doing it. Now, in terms of what he brings on the field, really already, I think, an NFL level pass rusher. Somebody that can really get off the ball, has great speed to power, great upper body strength and hand usage as a pass rusher, and really can rush the quarterback. And that's, I think, something that they tried with Barmore and with Ronnie Perkins, their third round pick. They were really focused, I think, on adding some more heat to that pass rush, and they were able to do it with Barmore, certainly. And they lost Adam Butler in free agency to the Miami Dolphins, who was kind of their interior pass rush specialist, a guy that was really effective in obvious passing situations, rushing the passer, whether it was a schemed rush or one-on-one rep or whatever. He was very good at that. And so Barmore, I think, pencils right into that role that Adam Butler left behind. Now, as a run defender, he's not Vince Wilfork, right? You're not going to line him up over the center or as a true
Yes.
nose
Yeah.
tackle and have him eat blockers and stuff like that. But the Patriots love to play their defensive ends kind of pinched in like a 5 technique role, so like right over the offensive tackle, or maybe in a 4-eye, which is a little bit shaded into the B gap.
Okay.
And that's where I think Barmore can be really effective, is if you play him essentially as a 3-4 defensive end instead of a true nose tackle. He's got the upper body strength. He's got great lateral mobility. He's got, with that upper body strength, the ability to shed blocks and get off blocks and reset the line of scrimmage. So I think he's a 3-4 end in their system.
Okay.
And then I think he kicks inside some to rush the passer in obvious passing situations. And that's a player that sort of mold, if he can put it all together, that can very easily play all 3 downs for the Patriots on defense.
And what I think what Patriot fans should be excited about, especially because it's Bill Belichick and his coaching acumen and his staff in general being able to coach up these guys, is you mentioned Perkins. So they get another edge guy who projected to be an outside 3-4 guy coming into the draft.
Right.
Doesn't have any cover experience, but apparently you would think early on in his career he's going to be strictly more of a pass rush guy, maybe even wide 9 kind of lineup kind of deal. Throw in Cam McGrone in the 5th round, who, if it wasn't for injuries, I think would have been a day 2 pick. And
yeah, me too.
Yeah. He's got blitz experience. He's got excellent range, tools to be an every down starter. Throw in Anthony Jennings from last year, Chase Winovich, Josh Uche. There's a lot to be excited about. Oh, and of course also Duggar. There's a lot to be excited about over the last couple of drafts about a lot of these young, high talented college players coming to this program.
A lot of high energy guys too, right? Winovich, Perkins, Uche. These are guys, Duggar. These are guys that fly around. Fly around a little bit. Even McGrone, to a degree too, can do that as well, assuming that he bounces back from the ACL and everything fine. I thought that they really, the last couple of years, especially in those 2 drafts, with the Winovich draft and the Uche draft, they focused on athleticism and explosiveness. They knew their defense had to get faster. Now, unfortunately, that did leave them susceptible to the run last year, and they got run on a lot, and especially run on off the edge, because guys like Winovich, he's not an edge setter. He's a pass rusher.
Yep.
He's a guy that wants to get up the field. He wants to be attack minded. He's not going to be somebody that's going to set the edge. So I think with the Ronnie Perkins pick, Perkins a little bit stronger. He's a little bit sturdier on that edge. He played a lot of defensive end with his hand in the dirt for Oklahoma, so he's got a little bit more burliness to him. He's over 250 pounds. So they sort of compromised, I think, with Ronnie Perkins, where they said, we still want an athlete, we still want a guy with a high motor, we still want a guy that can make explosive plays, but we also need to get a little bit stouter. We need to be a little bit stronger on the edge of the defense, and that's where I think Ronnie Perkins fits in, because the Patriots system in terms of their run defense and their fits is predicated on being able to set the edge. They want to funnel everything back inside so that they have those big DTs. They typically have big Lawrence Guy types of defensive tackles that they play inside. They have Dante Hightowers off the ball that are these physical freaks. They want to funnel all those running plays in the trenches and keep it in that phone booth. And last year, too often teams would just run off tackle on them and get outside, and it was too difficult for those linebackers and those DTs to go work down the line of scrimmage and make plays, so they got gashed. So I think that they want to get sturdier on the edge. Winovich, there are rumors out to actually confirm rumors at this point from Mike Reese that he's putting on about 10 pounds this offseason to be a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical player as well. So they're trying to meet in the middle, right? They still want to get faster, but they want to be a little bit more traditional in terms of the guys that they play out on the edge. And that's why you saw Matt Judon. That's why you see Kyle Van Noy back here as well. Both those guys are very good edge setting players too.
All right, and one more on defense, and that's Joshua Bledsoe from Missouri. More of and he's got the potential to be kind of like a hybrid nickel player. And I know that's what we talked about too a lot last year, is because Duggar, was he going to be that guy? So is it possible that Bledsoe, he's going to be thrown into the mix? Is Duggar still, though, right now, is the main guy that they're hoping can be that guy?
So I actually, I have a working theory right now about Kyle Duggar because they signed Jalen Mills in free agency, who is kind of that nickel hybrid player as well.
Yes.
They have Adrian Phillips on the roster too. They draft Joshua Bledsoe. So I actually think that they might be transitioning Kyle Duggar back to his college role as a free safety this year,
Okay.
where he can roam because he is such a physical athlete that and he was a great ball hawk at Lenore Ryan as well, coming over the top because he's got that speed and that athleticism, and then he's got a great vertical. So he can go up and high point the ball with the best of them. Devin McCourty is getting pretty long in the tooth.
Yeah.
He's a player that they need to start looking for the next guy at that spot. And if you just look at their offseason moves, they added way more Patrick Chung type players this offseason than Devin McCourty molds. So
Okay.
something tells me that they already feel like they have a Devin McCourty successor on the
All right.
roster. Maybe it's Kyle. I want it to be Kyle Duggar because I think he can be a force. I think he can be a takeaway guy. I think if you put him in the Chung role, you're pigeonholing him, to guarding tight ends and playing near the line of scrimmage and doing things with his back to the line of scrimmage in man coverage where he's not going to be able to turn the ball over as often. He's not going to be able to beat around the ball as often because he's going to be running downfield with Travis Kelce instead of watching the
Sure.
quarterback. Right. So if you put him in the middle of the field, you put him as like a robber or a deep zone player. Now all of a sudden he can hunt. Right. And he's
Sure.
got that type of athleticism to be able to do that. So that's what I'm hoping because I think that they could really get a high impact takeaway machine in Kyle Duggar, whether it's being an enforcer, whether it's ranging over the top. I think he can do all those types of things and force fumbles, force interceptions, and take the football away. And I think that's going to be way more impactful than a guy that can guard a tight end.
Yeah.
You can find guys that can play tight ends in
Yeah.
man coverage. You can't find guys that are true ball hawks as easily as a guy that hopefully like a Devin McCourty was, and hopefully someone like Kyle Duggar can become.
All right. Also, they get Stevenson from Oklahoma in round 4, the running back, who was suspended for 5 games, still led the
Yeah.
Sooners in rushing and touchdowns. Big guy, good blocker already. Throw in on offense, 6th round, William Sherman, the offensive lineman, who started 3 years at tackle, both tackle spots, but he's projected inside at guard. And then I mentioned Trey Nixon in round 7. So those are 3 other offensive players that the team added. A couple of things I noticed with Stevenson and Perkins, both from Oklahoma. Both of them have some issues that
Yeah.
we didn't really touch up on because not only did Stevenson miss 5 games from suspension, but there were some off the field issues for Perkins as well. But what were you surprised about the pick of going with Stevenson for a player that I don't know? I mean, he obviously has something that they like. He's got a specific tool set that will limit him. But still, were you a little bit surprised they went with a player like that in round 4?
Not stunned that they went with a running back. I was surprised that they went with this particular running back due to his playing style. I figured they were going to try to get a guy that was a little bit more explosive, a little bit more quick twitched, so it's sort of like a James White type versus a
Was
power
there
back,
someone else on the
right?
board at the time that you?
Like a Demetric Felton from
Yes.
UCLA, for
Okay.
example, right? As someone that could catch passes. And I think Stevenson can catch the football, but he's not a difference maker in the
No.
passing game, right?
No.
He's a check down option. Maybe you throw him a screen on first down to catch the defense by surprise. He's a very high level pass protector. He's got good size and he's got good ability to pick up the blitz. That's something the Patriots really covet in running backs. That helps you get on the field early as a running back. But I think what the Patriots saw was first of all just looking at the team in terms of the roster. Sony Michel's 5th-year option was not picked up. That's not a coincidence that they drafted a running back in the 4th round that fits that early back mold, and then they didn't pick up Sony's 5th-year option. And my guess is that they're looking at moving on from Sony Michel after this coming up season. I'd be pretty shocked if he gets a second contract in New England. So I think the plan is to hand the backfield over to Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson starting in 2022.
Okay.
And that I think is something that they were sort of looking for. Ramondre Stevenson's style of play, and there are some concerns about the suspension and stuff, but just his overall style of play fits extremely well. They love downhill power backs, and guys like Corey Dillon or LeGarrette Blount or these bigger backs that can really run people over have been very successful with the Patriots. And they love power plays. They love counter. They love lead with the fullback. They love to get downhill and just get guys rolling. And when you have a 235-pound running back that the line is blocking everybody away
Yeah.
from, you get guys like that in the open field. And that's why LeGarrette Blount had huge success
Yeah.
here. That's why
Great
Corey
point.
Dillon had huge
Yep.
success here. And so that's what I think they're seeing with Stevenson, who's a very powerful runner, very difficult to bring down, keeps his feet moving, which I like for big backs. Some of those guys tend to stall their feet and stop their feet, makes them easier to tackle. He's somebody that gets downhill quickly. He knows his sort of his skill set and his limitations and what works for him. And at OU, he got great blocking. That's a great blocking
Yes.
offensive line. That's a great run game scheme in terms of scheming it up. And he's going to get the same with the Patriots. He's going to have Shaq Mason and Mike Onwenu and David Andrews and Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn paving the way for him. And he's going to be able to get downhill and be a bully. And I think that they really saw, I don't want to compare him to Corey Dillon because Corey Dillon was a really good player. I think they saw somebody like LeGarrette Blount with him that can be that sort of downhill back. And 2014, I believe it was, LeGarrette Blount rushed for 16 touchdowns here and over 1,000 yards. So those types of running backs can be highly productive in New England's system because they're a power running team with a power back, and they kind of mesh really well together.
Makes sense. And then the other thing you notice, which makes this is just typical New England. Stevenson, McGrone, Bledsoe. I mean, these guys are also going to be thrown in there on special teams, and they could be big contributors on special teams.
Yeah, so Stevenson talked about that actually when we spoke to him after the pick, and he said that he was a big contributor on kick coverage units, and specifically at OU. So he definitely played a lot of kick coverage. The other guy you have to talk about here with the Patriots running backs is Brandon Bolden, who's still under contract with New England. He's going to make the team. He's a leader in the locker room and a core special teamer, so he's going to be here. And Bolden's, just like James White, is not a youngin, right? He's starting to get a little bit up there in age too. So they're going to have to start. And Rex Burkhead, who I don't think is going to be re-signed due to injury, he was a big time special teams contributor as well. So that body type, the Patriots, when they project special teams roles, look at body types, right? We had a 230-pound running back as the seventh gunner on our kickoff coverage, or we had a 230-pound running back as our personal protector in our punt coverage, right? And they kind of pencil guys in based off of their body types. So I think they see Stevenson in a similar body type to a guy like Brandon Bolden, and maybe he has the potential to contribute in that way as well.
Before I let you go, a couple quick things. First of all, longtime Patriot fan, and I worked with him for many years down in South Florida. Nickname Captain wants to know who will take Ernie Adams' job.
It's a big question. It's gigantic shoes to fill. Like, this is, other than Bill Belichick, this is the brain trust of the Patriots dynasty, right? With Ernie Adams, advanced scouting, scouting the draft, game planning, practice preparation, all these types of things that the Patriots are known for. Bill Belichick and Ernie Adams devised together. This was a package deal for many, many years, dating all the way back to the Giants and the Cleveland Browns, before Bill Belichick even got to the Patriots. So this is a big loss for New England, and they've sort of attacked it from multiple angles. So when Matt Patricia got fired by the Detroit Lions, first of all, Matt Patricia came back, and he's somebody that, in a weird way, might be better suited for that type of role than coaching.
Okay.
This is a guy that is a rocket scientist, has a lot of high level college degrees, is a very, very smart person, but maybe just isn't the best coach.
Sure.
and maybe isn't the best guy to call plays for your defense and stuff like that. But in terms of scouting, in terms of understanding the salary cap, in terms of all these other parts of team building, maybe Matt Patricia has the brain power to be able to take on some of those responsibilities. The other guy that he brought with him from Detroit is a guy named Evan Rothstein, who is basically a young analytics guru, a young Ernie Adams,
Okay.
somebody that did a lot of those types of things in Detroit. So Evan Rothstein started working under Ernie Adams towards the end of last year when Matt Patricia was fired by the Lions. And hopefully Ernie Adams started showing him some of the ropes of how the Patriots do things. So I think Rothstein is you're a new nerd, right? He's the new analytics
Uh-huh.
guy. He's the new spreadsheet guy, and I think Matt Patricia is sort of the new advisor to the head coach that can sort of do some of the things that Ernie Adams did. So again, you're not replacing him with one guy, right? You're not going in there and saying uh, Evan Rothstein or Matt Patricia is the new Ernie Adams, because Ernie Adams touched way too many pieces of the
Sure.
pie to just say that one guy is going to take over for him. So it's going to take multiple guys. And there was a lot of criticism of Nick Caserio on his way out, but the Patriots lose Nick Caserio to the Texans as the general manager there, who is another guy that wore several different hats. He was more than just a personnel guy. He was a guy that was out on the practice field every week. He was out in the coach's booth during games, advising Josh McDaniels in game, and then he was somebody that obviously worked in the personnel department. And both of those guys, their job description would be a full page, like it would be a laundry list of things that they were doing for New England. So there's a lot of things that the Patriots need to sort of spread out to a bunch of different people to kind of replace some of the stuff that they've left with those two guys.
And it probably will take a few years till you figure out maybe there is one guy that will eventually be the guy. But like you said, it's
Right.
going to take a few years before you can figure that out, and you need more than one to make sure that you have some backup. Before I let you go, Evan, was there a player or a position that you wish the Patriots had taken, or you think the Patriots have still not, figured out yet, or they still have an issue with?
I don't see a major hole on the team for the 2021 season. We all went into the draft expecting them to address cornerback and offensive tackle, thinking, okay, Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson on cornerback, their contracts expire at the end of this year. At tackle, they did pick up Isaiah Wynn's fifth-year option, so now he's under contract for 2 more years. But on the other side, Trent Brown only signed a 1-year deal to come back with the Patriots. So they had some 2022 and beyond holes at those 2 spots. They got Sherman in the 6th round. They didn't draft a corner. So those are still things that I kind of look at. And everybody in New England is still scratching their heads as to why they didn't take a wide receiver. Now, I'm not really in that school. I think that it's a little bit overblown. Certainly, they could do better than Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, but the team obviously feels really good about those guys. They paid them in free agency a pretty good amount. I think they're a little bit better than the general public thinks, and they're going to be in a ton of 12 personnel with those 2 tight
That's right.
ends. Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry are going to each play close to 90% of the snaps if they're both healthy for the entire year. So you're really only looking at 3 wide receivers getting on the field regularly, right? Because you'll get into some 11, but most of the time they're going to be in 12. So 2-3 wide receivers, then you need a 4th or a 5th guy just for depth purposes in case somebody gets hurt. But they're not going to be a team that's going to put 5 wides on
No.
the field and spread it out, right? That's not their goal this year.
And you
So
still have to find
I
out
don't
whether or not what you have in Harry.
Right. And maybe Harry is in a perfect spot now where he can kind of sit behind a couple of veterans and sort of be the 4th option, right? Instead of being the guy
Yeah.
that they drafted in the 1st round with all this pressure to be Tom Brady's go-to target right away, maybe they can kind of develop him a little bit more behind the scenes. Similar with Jared Stidham. I'm going to believe it in N'Keal Harry when I see it, but
At least he won't have to go up
that's
against
sort
the
of the thought.
opposition's number 1 corner every week, though.
Right. That's going to be up to the tight ends or maybe Aguilar if he starts to kind of break
Yeah.
out like he did with the Raiders last year. But again, the offense, and I think that this is sort of unconventional for 2021, maybe 10 years ago when the Patriots had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, we can harken back to that a little bit. The offense is going to run through the two tight ends.
Yes.
Those are their two. That's 1A and 1B in the pecking order right there. And then Nelson Aguilar is kind of your third option as the top wide
That's
receiver
right.
on your depth chart. So they're going to run things through the tight ends. They're going to run things through their running game, certainly as well. And that's the type of offense that they're going to be for better or worse. Now, it's not Kansas City doesn't do
Yeah.
it
It's not
that way.
sexy.
Tampa doesn't do it away.
Yeah.
Buffalo doesn't do it that way. That's not what teams are doing
Yeah.
nowadays, but that's how the Patriots are going to run.
But actually, that's also smart because it's sort of like when you play Army or Navy. It's
Right.
tough to play them because you don't go up against them every week. You have to
Right.
prepare for an offense that you're not used to preparing for. Patriots are going to have
Yeah.
an offense that not many teams are going to have. So
How many teams have corners with size that can take on 6'4" pass
yep,
catchers? How many teams are when they run 12 personnel, the Patriots are going to have two guys in Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry that can really run block. So they're going to be able to use those guys as focal points in the running game. They're going to be able to run people over theoretically.
sure,
We'll see if they can put it all
yeah.
together. That's the way it looks on paper right now.
All right, Evan, great job as always. You've got your podcast. What is that daily?
Twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we go live at around 5 o'clock and do the pod. But you can also find it anywhere you find the pods, Apple, Spotify, whatever. And it's also on our YouTube channel, Patriots Press Pass. And I just wanted to plug, I did a Mack Jones film session where I watched about 40 minutes of Mack Jones tape and broke it all down. So that's on our YouTube channel as well. I'm working on one on Christian Barmore right now too. So we're going to have a couple of different ones of those up on the Patriots draft class of me just kind of getting right into the tape and explaining what they saw in these players essentially.
Awesome. And what's after that? Camp?
Then we will. We're hoping that there's going to be mini camp
Yes.
this year. There obviously wasn't mini camp last year due to the pandemic, so that should be rookie mini camp. Will be sometime in a couple of weeks. It's probably going to be pretty soon, towards the middle or end of May. Then mandatory mini camp for veterans will probably be early June. Then you kind of have that 6 week dead period in the NFL from the end of mini camp to the start of training camp at the end of July.
All right, Evan, thanks a lot. Also want to remind everybody this is the second draft recap we've done so far. Bengals already up on the library on our YouTube channel, and next up will be the Miami Dolphins. So, and of course, that's Alan Pupar, who covers the Dolphins for All Dolphins at Sports Illustrated. Evan, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you again sometime, definitely before training camp.
Sounds good, Greg. No problem.